Welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast. I'm Ben Plumley, and we're on the road with the Global Listening Project, this time in Singapore, looking at trust in technology, artificial intelligence, mRNA, and what the future of the internet is for young people and older people. Well, our guests today are Professor Heidi Larson, who is professor at the University of Washington. She's also the founder of the Vaccine Confidence Project and, of course, the co-founder of the Global Listening Project. Hi, Heidi. How are you doing?
Good morning. Nice to see you, Ben.
Nice to see you from Singapore. We're also joined, and I'm really delighted to welcome her, first time on the show, and definitely not the last, Dr. Leesa Lin, who is the Senior Research Director at the Laboratory of Data Discovery for Health at the Hong Kong University. Welcome, Leesa.
Hi, good morning, Ben, and hi, good morning, Heidi.
Now, although it looks like we are sitting in different rooms all around the world, and I happen to be in California, you are both in Singapore, right? You're actually in the same hotel.
That's right.
Yep, we are attending the same roundtable.
So let's then kick off, if we may. Heidi, so here we are, Global Listening Project in Singapore. What is it about the city-state that makes it so interesting for you to kick off this process of sharing early data that we're finding through the Global Listening Project?
Well, one of the key areas of investigation and listening that we're doing in the Global Listening Project is around trust in technology, because technology was throughout the COVID response, and we expected a lot of publics in terms of everything from vaccine passes to trace and track to making vaccine appointments, and that's in the whole information technologies. But also, there were a lot of new innovations in health itself, including the vaccines. The whole mRNA platform is a whole new type of. I mean, there's been a decade of research behind it. It's not like it was invented overnight, which was what it felt like, because it was so kind of abruptly introduced in the public. But it's been in development and in research for a decade, and that too was brand new to the public as a new type of vaccine. So we wanted to, in a time of acute uncertainty like this pandemic was, as the virus itself was evolving, all these new things were a lot to manage. And some people were able to do it better than others for access reasons, for digital literacy reasons, for age reasons. So we're really looking at that as a key area of investigation. And why Singapore? Well, Singapore is an amazing small state, nation state. On the other hand, it's incredibly vibrant, a real regional hub of innovation. And since we have a growing Asian presence in different places, including our collaboration with Leesa's lab, as well as multiple other countries, it's a great regional center for us. I'm also a visiting professor here, and two of the institutes that we are most connected to are the Lloyd's Register Institute for Public Understanding of Risk and the Center for Trust in the Internet and Community. And they co-hosted this roundtable and brought together an amazing group of people from areas of strategic foresight to computer science to pandemic response to also in trust and risk.
So we'll come on to the roundtable in a minute. But Leesa, so I got the name of your laboratory correct. What is it that it does?
So it's a lab that is funded by the Hong Kong government, 5-year grant from Hong Kong government, looking to translating research findings into commercializable products. And the team I'm leading at is focusing on utilizing big data and artificial intelligence in promoting vaccine confidence and addressing vaccine hesitancy and related misinformation. So the lab has been around since 2020. Incidentally, that was the time that when COVID hit, but we were able to take that opportunity and then responded quickly, creating like conversational AI chatbot and other gadgets for fact checking, etc. So that, and we implemented we use implementation science research, looking at evaluation, effectiveness, feasibility, and scalability. So that's where we are.
You're particularly interested in the role of digital media and social platforms as a way of helping the GLP understand perceptions of risk and perceptions of preparedness for emergencies as they happen. And so just a couple of quick questions for you. How embedded is the latest technology, these technologies, in major urban areas in Asia? And how embraced are they?
I would say that, so my background is in communication and behavioral sciences. And then during COVID, I would say that it sort of coincides, COVID sort of coincides with the development of adoption of AI and big data, and definitely offer us an opportunity to utilize social media, especially with the lockdown and everything, so that, this is unprecedented compared to the previous pandemics, which is H1N1. We see that huge growth in the adoption and the use, and never before that we saw it was required to, for example, have an app on the phone for like a vaccine checkup for your, how many vaccines, how many doses that you have taken. So this is all unprecedented. So we are in the very particular time. And so in these countries, in city-states, Singapore and Hong Kong, they embrace it fully. I think COVID seems to offer an opportunity for digitalization. And then for these places, they are well positioned before COVID to embrace new technology. But then I think COVID sort of giving the opportunity to take it to the next level. And given that the vibrant community in tech already existed before and during COVID, is sort of make it into a really well positioned. So I would just give you one example. For example, from what I know, like Hong Kong U, like in November 2022, it was ChatGPT was introduced. I think it caused a huge debate in academia and government, etc. How are we going to handle this? This is like going viral. For Hong Kong U, for example, they take on this and then encouraging students and scholars and researchers to use API despite it's not like readily available to the public. So I think what in Singapore, I think they are taking the same approach. We are trying to understand it's coming, but how do we use it responsibly, and how do we be able to carefully introduce it to the public and regulate it instead of just banning it and reject it completely. So I would say that it's been quite exciting to see this is happening. But then obviously there are differences in the countries, especially in Asian countries, in how they respond to it. But the city-states and the cities that you're referring to happen to be quite ready to take it on.
Well, I hope we can really do a deep dive into that in the course of this podcast. But I hope you will both excuse me if I ask a silly question, a stupid question. We're recording this just as Apple TV is coming to the end of its second season of its dramatization of Foundation by Isaac Asimov. And Heidi, I was catching up with episodes last night after our recent trip to Nigeria. And in one of the episodes, it made reference to Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, which have had a huge cultural influence. Those 3 laws are no harm to humans, obey humans, and for the robot, the AI, whatever, to protect itself as long as it doesn't harm humans. And I've always thought that was a really neat summary of protections that would make sense for artificial intelligence.
Or in general.
In general, yeah. But do you think with this flourishing of AI that we're seeing, do you think we're prepared for all of this? Do you think we're prepared for what's coming?
No, actually. Or I shouldn't say no so flatly, because I think it really depends on where you live and who you are. And that's one of the things we've really seen in our global listening is how different the settings are, and quite unexpected places like, as you mentioned just recently, the global listening in Lagos. There were, people were especially younger people, embracing the new technology and felt like, educationally, actually, they did much better during COVID because of the technology, and in ways that they didn't fully utilize in the classroom. And in other places, education has fallen behind for different reasons. So it's impacted people in different ways. And I think when we think about these technologies, it's really partly, as Leesa said, what the readiness, what the environment is, what the willingness to take risks. That's another piece of it that, I think the UK, for instance, is hugely risk averse. In my experience when it comes to new, moving forward, working with new things. Europe also is probably one of the more regulated environments, but that's not all bad. I think that there are good reasons for that. But sometimes regulation for brand new things that you don't really know where the edges are, it's not great to regulate too much, because it can really interrupt, not in positive disruptive ways, but it can halt some of the important aspects of innovation. So I think, as Leesa was saying, this approach of being open to it and exploring it, but with a cautious eye to some boundaries, I mean, like the ones that you highlight from the Foundation series, is really important. I mean, I remember one of the last times I was in Hong Kong, it happened to coincide with the time there were the big debates about the use by the Chinese scientists of the CRISPR technology. And I'll never forget this quote that he had, which was, "But I didn't break any rules." And he was right. There were none at the time. So I think that there are different levels of readiness. I think in many settings, we were not ready for this. And there are big debates within the technology community about the timing of GPT.
AI movement, yeah.
AI has been around for a while, but this new particular aspect of it that has been made public, there are a number of people in the technology world that feel like too soon. Because they felt that we are in the technology community very aware that there still are risks that needed to be, ironed out, that could take people off piste in not good ways. But it's finding that balance, and at this point, it's too late to turn back because it's out there. I think it just needs a close eye on it. So partly ready, not fully ready, to answer your question, and needs a lot of a cautious eyes on it while giving space.
Leesa, your take on it, and I'm sort of slightly uncertain how to ask this, given the context of you being in Hong Kong. But your sense of the future for AI, for GPT, and particularly its potential for health.
So I would say that similar to the event of innovations like the internet, smartphones, social media, I think that we see that AI brings boundless opportunities. However, there are always risks involved. And then I think even before those innovations, I've seen that one photo actually back in maybe it was the 60s or 70s. There were protests against calculators. So for the same reasons. So they started worrying about math teacher being out of job and etc. So I think that there are always risks and fears around new innovations that might change human behavior and change how we do things. But then as we see that from these events and innovations, there's no turning back. So it's really about, I totally echo what Heidi was saying, that it's really about how we pay close attention to what is happening. How do we allow it to grow, but then at the same time bring it to be responsible? I also think that allowing it to be applied to healthcare and even the public health context is inevitable. As we already know that, if we counting on human capacity, human get tired, human get memory, like a short-term memory, or even like a longer-term memory, fatigue, etc. But AI wouldn't. So you were mentioning of the three laws remind me of an old movie, iRobot, long time ago.
That was also based on Isaac Asimov's.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was totally about these, so this debate and this thinking is not new. That movie was, 10, 15 years ago, and still extremely relevant. So I think we didn't know that it will come until it actually happened last year. So I think that it's time for us to come together to look at it. But what I would say is from the data point of view, because since the GPT became available last year, of course, the fact that our team studies trust and confidence on vaccine quickly jump into trust and confidence in AI. So we're looking at global sentiments around artificial intelligence in general, and definitely GPT in general. I would say that it's very aligned with what Heidi just shared. Keep in mind that social media data, Twitter posts are mostly used by a certain demographic, which are younger and more ready to embrace technology. And the overall sentiment is quite positive. They are definitely showing anxiety and concerns about job replacement, etc., etc. And then the comparison between human performance and AI performance. That's actually the number one debate topic. But at the same time, we also see excitement. They start to talk, a lot of people sharing what AI can do, and then the potentials of creating text, images, and things that in the speed and the quality that in the past would have taken months or years to do. So I think that I think we might be going into that topic later on, but then there's definitely age disparities in this. There are definitely some regional debate into it. I think some countries are more ready than the other. Some certain demographic is more ready than the other. But I would say that there's no turning back. So I would say that embrace it with cautious would be our approach. And that's what we are trying to do right now. Looking at artificial intelligence, GPT's potential in applying to research activities. How do we regulate it? How do we make sure that it's scientifically feasible? And then how do we make sure that it fulfill some of the tasks that it might take us months or years to do for data, very repetitive, boring, like manual laboring work, but then now being replaced by AI. Whereas it might liberate us as a social scientist to allow us for thinking and then the time and space to really give our expert opinions without being tied up in the more like a tiring task. But that's our hope. I think this will require a lot of interdisciplinary approach in looking at AI as an industry in general, and definitely looking at how public confidence and acceptance around this issue.
Do you know, there is no question that this is the uncharted territory. It's perfect territory, Heidi, for the Global Listening Project. And I know that, we are really intrigued about how this is all going to play out as communities, people build resilience and preparedness for the emergencies that are very likely to be around us. But coming back to the roundtable, Heidi, you're doing something I think is very interesting and sort of slightly counterintuitive to the usual presentation of academic data. GLP is close to completing this generation of data through focus groups in 70 countries around attitudes and perceptions around preparedness, and particularly societal preparedness. And you've called it the Societal Preparedness Index. And I guess we're going to be planning to launch it formally at the beginning of next year. But in the meantime, what you are doing is trailing and previewing some of the findings with roundtables like the one you've just had in Singapore with, some extraordinary leaders and commentators. And before getting into the data you actually did present, what's your thinking around doing this sort of quiet rollout rather than waiting for the big smells and bells and trumpets launch? Wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Well, I guess one of the most important reasons is that anything can happen any day. And as one of our advisory board members, Asi, who's was co-chairing the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, reminded us, he said, we worked so hard at making a beautiful, shiny report, World at Risk, and then a few months before COVID hit, and the report really didn't have a chance to get open and digested. And he and some others in the group, and I we were already thinking of it this way, but it became very much part of our mantra was to listen. And we want to listen from the very early data because also it can help our analysis. Our different roundtables are going to be in different settings. And we here in Singapore, it was on technology. We'll be doing a roundtable in Senegal and in Dakar at the Gates Grand Challenges. And that we'll give the global look, but really a closer look at Africa data and learnings and get feedback from that audience and engagement. In Tokyo, for the Japan work, again, we'll give a look at the global situation, but then more deep dive. And we're picking a number of settings. Tokyo's one of them where we'll be doing a more deep dive look. New York City is another one where we will be looking more deeply. So we'll have another roundtable there, bringing our data, but also inviting other people who we know are collecting relevant data or are working in relevant fields, that we can make sure that we're kind of sense-making and also, asking, what's your feedback? What questions how would you want to interrogate this data? What would be useful to you from this data as we move forward with our analysis? Because we have a massive amount of data, along with all the sociodemographic data around who's speaking and where. And so we want to, make it as useful as possible, but also make sure that we're not missing insights that others can give us. And It was fantastic yesterday. I mean, we shared both some of the quantitative survey results, as well as from our qualitative focus groups and interviews. And there was really valuable feedback. And aside from people being quite pretty impressed with the nature and scope of the work, but they helped us think of some very important questions. It's always risky to show a piece of work without having it fully ready and out there. So it's been a bit of risky behavior on our
but you
side.
know what, Heidi? It sort of makes me think that this is the democratization of data. It's not
Yes,
something
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
the academics are holding on to. It's how does it feel? How does it relate to you?
Exactly.
So what
Yeah.
were the top lines that you shared yesterday? What were the things that really stood out to you?
Well, it was very interesting looking at different apps that are available. I mean, the kind of things that people seem to be the most comfortable with. We're not only talking about usage, but sharing, willingness to share personal data, because for a lot of the new kind of therapeutics and work happening in the medical technologies and science will depend on having genetic information from people to make it more personalized, more specific to their condition. And so it's going to be important to understand how much people are willing to share, and for whether it's just for them or are they willing to share for the benefit of research and for others more broadly. And there was a lot of anxiety around sharing certain types of data. But the one they seemed most comfortable with was this SMART scale, people who have ambitions in their weight loss programs that want to share with others their progress, and fitness apps, how much running I did today or whatever I did. So stuff that was frankly related to body image, which is, you can see it as a positive willingness, but it's also an area that's a bit risky because as you know, and one of the things we're very concerned about, particularly with the younger cohort, is body shaming.
Yeah.
And we have to be very careful with this one because, we're getting a read on willingness to share, but the motives, there's a lot of surveys and research out there on, would you do this or would you do that, or how much do you use? But I think the real critical question that we need to understand is motive. What's the motive? If you're doing it because it's for the benefit of others, are you doing it because you're proud and happy about it, or are you doing that to shame others? And that's. You talked about self versus other with the series. That's something we want to really, especially more in our deep dives. Even things like trust. We think of trust as a good thing. Well, depends what you trust and who you trust and why you trust, because there are, as they say, some bad actors and some, well-meaning actors, and ones that are good for your health and ones that are not good for your health.
That's one of the things I was listening or watching in via Zoom on the discussion. And that's what really stood out to me. A comment you made about trust is not always a good thing. It's about, trust in authority particularly may not be a good thing. But I wonder, Heidi, how does all of this relate to people's preparedness for emergencies and crises? Is it about us understanding how people feel and think, or are there other things going on?
Well, our survey and focus groups have particularly been asking about not just attitudes and perceptions, but experience, and how did they cope? What worked, what didn't? What could have helped make their experience better? What were they frustrated by? Where was the innovation? Because there are many indices and surveys and preparedness efforts out there, but they rarely are talking about preparing people. And the only way, I have antibodies to deciding on how to prepare people sitting around a boardroom in Geneva or Washington or wherever without, maybe it's the anthropologist in me, But I think we have to, if we are going to do something like an index on societal preparedness, that needs to be informed by people. That needs to be informed by the experience of people and how they prepared, what they were missing, how we can learn more, and how we can build on that experience. We've had an experience in the last few years that we haven't had, in a century, and we've never had it when you consider it in the context of some of the new technologies. They didn't exist in the massive 1918 pandemic that rocked the world.
They didn't happen in the early days of HIV. I think this is a story I might have shared with you both, but a young activist blocking general practitioners, GPs, fax machines in the UK every Friday with what we thought were the latest data on new drugs that they ought to see, and it wasn't perhaps the most helpful thing.
Yeah.
Leesa, what stood out to you in the data that's coming through?
I would say that I think that one angle that we've been looking at, I thought that would be quite critical and relevant to this conversation would be the digital intelligence and the embracing of technology in the next societal preparedness, like preparedness for the next pandemic or the next large-scale disasters. Because we will see that this is being introduced another dimension of preparedness that was not well understood or laid out in previously. I think that in the past, we look at preparedness systems. We're looking at governance. We are looking at regulations. Are laws ready? Is the infrastructure ready? Even the stockpile, medical readiness. But then much less about, as Heidi said, how to prepare the public. So if we are bringing in societal preparedness, then trust in technology, trust in government, and then how do we get to them? When we have information, it's no longer a one-way conversation. Now, a one-way communication, it's a two-way conversation, even group conversations on social media, on individual communication platforms that we've seen using apps, etc. So how do we make it useful and then help people to make decisions that would be promoting and protecting their own health instead of the other way around? I think this requires actually not only thinking about exterior factors like to individual, but also we need to start looking at individual factors, the demographic, factors, how they influence that, their prior experience with the government, prior experience with the people, with the community, pre-existing social capital, things that we have seen being uncovered during COVID is that, I remember one discussion during the roundtable was that Heidi brought up supermarket were very important to some a demographic women above 40, 45 in Delhi, because it's important to their social experience and almost as an outlet during lockdown seasons. So things like that. And then we also found that at the beginning of COVID, I remember there was a huge shortage of masks and hand sanitizers. So people actually, I remember even at the time I was in Boston, and then there were my colleagues in other part of the towns, they started to create their own mask at home, trying to help supply health professionals. Imagine there was Boston. So there was a shortage of a mask for surgical masks and for medical professional use. Then we started looking for ways. So these are things that we did not see and anticipate before COVID, but then people come together and these show resilience and social capital. But how do we capture that? And then how do we make sure? So I think that maybe a podcast like this, maybe I think things that global listening would be continue to follow and uncover. I think this will be very important lessons to learn and to document, and for us to inform future preparedness.
You are both very much pragmatic optimists, and seeing the silver lining in every cloud. And Heidi, I it's not a question I've had a chance to ask you in the past, but we've come out of the pandemic phase of COVID. We're into hopefully the endemic phase. But do you think COVID made societal preparation? Did you think it makes it easier, or has it made it harder? Are we getting worse at it?
Well, I don't. We won't know till the next one. Let's put it that way. But we do have a huge opportunity, and I think, one of the reasons we've gotten so focused on technology is it's something tangible that we can do, is to use this peacetime before the next big one, or not even it doesn't even have to be the scale of COVID, but look at the number of natural disasters and other crisis situations where you need public cooperation, you need people to connect. I think if there's one critical thing we need to do is ramp up the fluency and the access, and in an age disaggregated way. Here in Asia, it's very different issues than in Africa, for instance. The demographic shift and the rate of older people versus younger people here is dramatic. And it's kind of the opposite in Africa. Although fertility is reducing, you still have a largely young population. Here, we had a unique situation where it was some of the elderly that were the vaccine refusers. And in Hong Kong, the highest rate of elderly refusing and dying of COVID in the world in Hong Kong. Who would have thought? Singapore, we have pockets of, and some of it was for different reasons, feeling like I live alone, and if something happens to me after that vaccination, it was interesting. I would have said, living alone, I wouldn't want to get COVID. And they were like, living alone, I don't want to see a reaction to this vaccine or traditional medicine, or the only thing I know about technology is my grandson showing me some scary thing on WhatsApp. So I think that there is an openness among older populations, but we see, and that was part of the data we showed yesterday, the openness or the fluency, the willingness goes down progressively after 55. But I think it's a matter of how we engage with that. And that's a task. And it's something we need to do soon, is to, at the design level, sit with some of the tech companies, say, listen, your TikTok and Instagram are being adopted like wildfire among young people, but let's see what we can do and what we can design, co-designed with some of the older populations about what they need and what they're comfortable with. And one of my first anthropology jobs, as it were, was in Silicon Valley when Apple was introducing like one computer per classroom. And the new head of education there said, listen, we need your help in the classrooms to understand why are some of the teachers resisting having a computer in the classroom. And so it's, I think, there's a lot of assumptions made even in tech companies in the evangelism about some of the new products, but not so much driven by what actually people need and want. So I think the more we can start to do that, and think of it not just a new tool for everybody, but this is a new tool for certain populations. And you can use the same tool, but what you do on it would be different. I think we do need some kind of harmony.
Yeah.
But I think it's a
so don't knock those telephones designed for older people. What are they? The jitterbug telephones, cell phones.
But don't stigmatize them by calling them older people things.
Well, no.
That's another thing.
No.
We have to be,
yeah, and I particularly am very bad at that. But So Leesa, how do you square the circle between the engagement and embracing of technology that you described at the start with the anxiety of our senior elders about accessing, how was that? Senior elders accessing and utilizing technology.
Experienced.
Experienced, yeah.
Yes.
Forever teenagers.
Yes.
I think that, so I think I'm going back to my preparedness background, which I started off, got me into a research career. I think that this past pandemic, as disastrous as it was, past tense, it actually, for the first time, I would say that, at least in our recent memory, that the global population, like a citizen, we share one common experience, which is very different from when I first started study preparedness, which was 2007, 2008. Most of the disasters, and they were learn and be contained, no matter how big or small it is, was it only affecting a certain population. But then this pandemic actually was so profound and so large and so long that now everybody knows what hand sanitizer is. You know that you need to do hand washing as soon as you get home. You know that, okay, mask is expected at some level as in certain circumstances. You know that, vaccine, all that, and you start to even understand, what do you mean by vaccine passport? So I think in terms of human experience, I would say that this is a rare occasion that we do share around the globe. And so I think there are a lot of things to unpack, but then there are different experiences, because of their individual circumstances and context. I think there are things that we definitely need to learn from it. And then I would say that for technology, we need to tailor into that human touch. So I have it's more like a personal story. I had people, obviously, experienced people in their lives. They started to, obviously, you not be surprised that they have been using their should be out of date and their phone for the longest time, until when I convinced them to change is when their children or grandchildren travel abroad. They want to see them. So when you have a smartphone, one button, you see your grandchild. Then okay, this is amazing. So they learn how to use touch screen instead of the flip phone. So I think that we need to understand their needs, and then you'll be able to find a nudge, and then allow them to start seeing the benefit of it. And then they would do this for their child. They would, maybe not for their children, for their grandchildren. So, a lot of things but it requires us to listen, to really understand, and then learn from their experience, and to really find the needs. And I go back to Heidi's approach about co-creating with the user experience and then the technology company to really understand. But I think that for them, it's a great market. It was an aging population. This is what we are dealing with. And then I think that for future preparedness, it's also extremely important for us to understand not just digital intelligence, but also tech intelligence. So I will end my note on it.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour, but we're recording this on the day after a terrible flooding took place on the coast of Libya, killing, up to 5,000 people. We've just had that dreadful earthquake in Morocco. And I just wonder how you see the role of technology, whether you feel able to comment even at this early stage around how we can utilize technology to help us prepare and build back from these kind of natural disasters, which, certainly as it relates to flooding, are only going to increase given the climate disruption that we're seeing.
Well, I think there are a number of ways. One is finding people. And even if they are not alive, frankly, if they have a phone on their body and somehow there's still a connection, I mean, in a flooding, phones are more waterproof than they used to be. But, things like GPS tracking, people sometimes are hesitant to be sharing all kinds of things, but many people are totally on with their GPS for mapping and other things. So finding people, connecting people is one way. It can help the search and find people, the people who are out there, to communicate with each other. There's a lot of ways that it can be used. And I think that, there are different challenges with something like a flood, and because if it knocks the system out, there's going to be a limit to how, your battery life or whatever will last, or your power. But I think you have to look at the usefulness of these things, not by the instrument itself, but by the situation. So what are the problems we have to solve here? We need to find people as soon as possible. We need to understand, where this is going and what the impact has been. So we need to measure that. What are the different aspects? What are the needs? We have to assess the needs. Is it food? Is it water? Is it health? Where are those facilities? How can we track the supplies there? So by making it problem-based, and also, as Leesa mentioned in the case of the grandchildren, find things that are motivators for people. It's not necessarily going to be the possibilities of the thing. You need to give them something particular that's going to make them take that risk and make that leap. That's something that they care about. And, in the case of these emergencies, if it's going to be possibly finding someone, they're going to want to learn as much as they can about that technology. So it's an opportunity to. So it's pretty awful what's been happening in both Libya and Morocco and Maui, and what we're seeing around the world. Not to go to another subject, but just to stress the importance of trying to be prepared for these events, crisis events, is that they're happening not only more frequently, but less predictably, less, more intensely, with kind of a shock effect. So, we don't have a lot of time to prepare. We need to. It's not preparing for the next pandemic in 100 years. It's preparing for crises and other critical events that are going to need people to get it together, so to speak.
Well, before Elon Musk switches off our Starlink connection between California and Singapore, what's next for you? What's next on the agenda for the GLP? Leesa, where are you off to next?
I am, research-wise or location-wise.
Hey, vacation is preparation.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm actually, my next step is going to bring back everything I learned from this roundtable back to Hong Kong. We're going to review our research agenda. What is next coming for AI? What is coming next for big data? I would also like to echo what we just discussed about disasters that hit. I grew up in Taiwan. Typhoon, earthquakes are part of our routine. It makes us, we don't even concerned about it if it's not above a certain magnitude. But then, it's about preparedness. You will prepare, you learn, you train, and then you do exercise and drills. But they are only to a certain level that you can prepare. So I think technology in this case, I remember there was a huge typhoon. It was actually when we were young, but at the same time, people came together. They started to, because there were flood that sort of took out the roads, etc. But people report that they are safe online because they try to find people. And then so one important thing is to check in to show that you're alive and you're here. you're safe. The second thing is, okay, because of flood, people are stuck in their buildings, like high rises. Then you talked about, okay, I still have some food here. I have rice, I have here. Whereas people who are like naturally come together, then we can share and coordinate. They need lifeboats to like pick up people who are stuck at a certain place. They are stuck in their home, but somehow there is still Wi-Fi and there's still internet. It allows them to like self-coordinate. So I think one thing that we learned from disaster response is that the first responders are local. It's usually the local community, local neighborhood that responded. Like you can't wait for the government and the military to come in to open the roads. Usually it requires local preparedness and local response and societal preparedness. And at that time, we need to, I think as a tech company and then hopefully technology developers, like I think if you can empower people to do that, that would be a huge help. So I think that things I learned from this roundtable and this podcast, I think we're going to review what is happening in terms of like public sentiment and confidence around it, and then starting to identify needs. And echoing what Heidi was saying, that, you know, how do we motivate people and to adopt certain things and try to dissuade them from doing certain things that may not be helpful to their health.
Well, great. And Heidi, we will be on the road again in Senegal with Global Challenges, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us in the Global Listening Project, it's the beginning of the next exciting chapter of our work. I mean, we've been doing a lot of listening around the world, and we will continue to do that. But with this new tsunami of data from 71 countries, we have a lot of exciting analytic time ahead. And while we're doing these roundtables, we'll be feeding into that. But the next few months is going to be a lot of work and trying to really correlate and analyze the different types of questions we've been asking, because they cover a range of issues, and look at, you know, what we can present, not only in the report in December, but as we roll out during the year, what are the implications of this, and also look at which areas in this broader work we've done do we want to follow over time with our index.
Yeah. A busy few months ahead of us.
Yeah.
The start of a busy few months leading to a busy few years, no doubt. Well, thank you both very much for your time today. It's early morning in Singapore. I should let you go off and get a really good Singaporean breakfast and some lovely hot coffee with hot milk. With that, thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much again to Heidi Larson and to Leesa Lin. They are the beating heart of the Global Listening Project. We'll be back with you shortly in Senegal and also Tokyo. A huge thanks to our director and producer, Eric Aspera from NewsDoc Media. Our production coordinator is Waisha Raphael, and our intern is Will Lansdale. So it just finally remains for me to invite you again to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us 5 stars. Have a great week and a safe week, everybody.